Really the number one blocker for sort of all things talent development in organizations, I think, are individual managers. Internal mobility. It's motivating, right? You get attachment to the organization, you can see what the future looks like, but it is less clear what the value proposition is for an individual manager.
But if you don't fully jump in, it won't work at all.
Individuals made lateral moves. They paid off tremendously. 3, 4, 5 years down the road, they made a ton more money, and they were like a step and a half ahead on the organizational hierarchy. If you want these 5 stars that you've recruited to stay, you have to give them a pathway, like let them know what it's gonna look like so they feel like they're developing. If you don't want your people to shop themselves around, be a better manager.
Hey, this is William Tincup and Ryan Leary. You are listening to the You Should Know podcast, and hopefully you're watching, because it's actually really cool to see Ryan and his maroon. It's crimson. He's kind of repping Alabama right now. I love that.
But the problem is I just realized as I'm looking at the screen now, I've done the no. I got stripes.
Yeah, no, that's.
But JR looks good. He's not like
his stripes look great.
Yeah.
His stripes look great.
Yeah.
I did not know.
No, you're good.
With an Alabama fan, because I am a jilted Notre Dame fan.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm Catholic, so at least we're kind of good. We're kind of good there. Y'all should have been, in my opinion, once I watched the game, Georgia and Alabama game. They got -3 rushing yards for the entire game. They didn't deserve to be in.
Kind of sounds like the Eagles tonight.
I wasn't going to bring it up, Ryan. I wasn't going to bring it up. Literally wasn't going to bring it up. I'm like, you know what? He's already going through enough emotions. I don't need to do that bit. But yeah, and I think it's, I think it's good that y'all pulled out of the bowl system, because I like some of the traditional bowls, but like and no offense, but like the Cheese Whiz Bowl or whatever. Like something.com bowl. Like I have nothing for that. However, but yeah, y'all got cheated, legit, and I'm a hardcore Alabama fan, so that's
glad we got this on record.
It's on record, and it's true. It's true. So listen, getting into your background, we have J.R. Keller, is a Cornell, and I won't mess up your title because I'm gonna let you tell us your title. So why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little about you.
Sure. I'm J.R. Keller. I'm an associate professor here at the ILR school at Cornell University, and I'm also the faculty director of our Executive Masters in Human Resource Management program.
And ILR stands for?
It's industrial labor relations. Yeah. But like all good brands like KFC, we only go by ILR anymore.
Well, it's a program. It's been around for a bit, right? Yeah. So that's what it would have been called, when people were dealing with labor relations and unions, how to both create them and stop them. So yeah, it makes sense, because it's where it came from. So I get it. So we're going to talk about a bunch of different topics, because your breadth and width of knowledge of HR is really, really, really interesting. And so rarely do we get a guest like you that we can kind of talk about a lot of different things. So I think we're going to kind of use that, right?
We are. So, and JR, so you do a lot of research, and you've written a lot. Why don't we start that? What are you researching today? What are you working on today that's interesting that we need to know about?
Nice. Yeah.
The vast majority of my research is around sort of 2 topics that I think are pretty complementary. One is how companies can make better hiring decisions in general. So whether you're hiring internally or hiring externally, my real focus lately has been more on the internal mobility, is sort of how do we create pathways for mobility? How do we make better internal hiring decisions, talent acquisition, sort of redeploy talent inside the organization. Then looking a lot at sort of how firms can use the external labor market strategically to sort of benchmark their current employees and see how they do that. Where does it work? Where does it not work? How do employees react to that?
Is that based on skills that you're seeing? Some of that, where who has what skills and where do you deploy them at what time? Like just in time in the manufacturing world, how do we have the just in time skills? Is that what you're?
Yeah, I think. Well, okay, so I think that there is. I think that's like the dominant discourse is around skills based hiring and skills based sort of talent deployment. I think how you actually do that and like whether that's actually happening in reality it's much more challenging. But I think that's what organizations would really like to be able to say. We're actually doing everything based on skills.
I like that you said that, because I tell people all the time, like the Communist Manifesto, when you read it, it's genius. It's absolutely a work of art. It's genius in theory. Once you put it in practice, talking about practice, when you put it in practice, it falls apart.
Yeah.
And so like we think that this skills-based hiring, skills-based everything, if we're going to do it that way, which sounds great, then you've got to hire to it. You've got to promote to it. You got to fire to it. You got to create learning paths to it. Like you've got to like fully jump in. And I think you have half a chance of making it work. But if you don't fully jump in, it won't work at all. In my opinion. Now, of course, you're the professional, so take all that, crush it. I'm good.
Listen, I'm the researcher. So I try to, a lot of times I think what researchers do, especially sort of in the HR field, is if you talk to enough people, which is what I think one of the awesome parts of being here at Cornell is, we have a Center for Advanced Human Resource Studies and all these graduates in senior HR and CHRO roles, is that you talk to people and understand what's going on, and then you kind of demonstrate it empirically. So it's not, a lot of that sort of distilling what's actually happening into practice and kind of trying to, I think, put some numbers and facts behind it.
Yeah. So we talked about this a bit previously, but with internal mobility, why is this so difficult? Like, what's the deal? Like, why it doesn't feel like it should be as difficult as we make it? Where's the blockers at?
Well, there's so many potential blockers. I think that the number one blocker, really the number one blocker for sort of all things talent development in organizations, I think, are individual managers. So supervisors, frontline supervisors, like the people who are directing other people and are responsible for other individuals. And I think part of that's maybe a lack of training or lack of experience. But I think part of it is, that I think the idea behind internal mobility, a big part of this is that you can have career progression within the organization, right? That's the whole promise. We bring you in, we develop you, you can make more money,
right?
Have more responsibility, develop more skills. You could build a career here, but that also requires like your current manager to champion you and to let you go. And a lot of managers engage in sort of the way that I've talked about it when I've studied it is talent hoarding.
Yeah. Nefarious activity, hold them back. Yeah.
Well, I think so. I went further in my mind as you were speaking to bad managers, poor managers, and great subordinates cover up their incompetency. And so some of it is maniacal in the sense of I'm going to hoard these people just because it makes my job easier. And some of it is more or less I'll get exposed if I let that person go. And so, and again, great managers, what I found in great managers is they love where people go and go on and do great things. And it's like a badge of honor where they're like, oh, I had 10 interns this summer and they're all doing great work. And so like they're talking about it in a positive way. These people came through, they learned, they gave a lot of value. Now they're on to great things and they love it. Like they take pride in it. Whereas bad managers, that's again, it could be just hoarding. It could be as easy as that. It's like, I got the talent. I'm going to keep the talent. Or it could be some darker things at play.
Yeah, I think a big part of it is like when you think about internal mobility, right? Like there's a really clear set of benefits for the organization, right? You're moving people around, you're developing skills, you're moving people to where they're going to be most productive. So It creates the most value for the organization. Ideally, the employee gets rewarded too. It's really great from an employee perspective, right? It's super motivating, right? You get attachment to the organization. You can see what the future looks like. But it is less clear what the value proposition is for an individual manager. And, that really was like, I have been thinking about this it's been one of the hardest things. I finally, a couple of years ago, published a study on this, but it took me a decade to figure out, like, how do you study hoarding? Because do managers actually admit to it? Nobody actually wants to admit to hoarding. Right.
No.
So you can't really sort of survey people about this. And so, I think having talked with a whole bunch of managers sort of over the course of my career was this idea that, what actually drives hoarding. I think it's less, there are some managers who you'd never want to work for, right? Like, it's really like, they're super selfish. They're really only looking out for themselves. Like, most managers just don't really, like, they don't know how to do it. And that what they get worried about is, like, I would let my best person go if I knew I had somebody to come in and replace them that was equally as good. So they're just worried about, like, what's going to happen. And so what was really cool is we had a company that shared basically 10 years of personnel records with us, like 40,000 person company. And so we were able to look at which managers actually promoted their people and which didn't. And, when we talk about promotions, like real promotions, not like Ryan works for me and he's a manager and now he's a senior manager, but he's just going to be lamb grab and still working for me. But, like, let's go on to let's work for another manager somewhere else in the organization. So you can look at, like, over the last year or two, like, what percentage of people they promoted out, and then compare managers who had really high scores, managers with really low scores, and then look at who inside the organization applied to work for those managers when they had open jobs. It's not going to surprise either of you, right? But managers who had demonstrated a track record of getting their people promoted, when they had open jobs, they got twice as many applicants. But even more so, they got twice as many applicants who were rated as high performers. And they got people from all over the company, all different divisions, all different locations, all different functions. Because what happens is employees, they talk to each other, right? And so they're like, Ryan might develop a reputation for being somebody who develops talent. So if I'm looking for a job, like, I'm not just thinking about what that job is I want to get, but, like, what's the job after that? And I want to go to a manager who's going to help sort of propel me forward. And so I think that was finally the first time where we could throw some data behind it and go back to managers and say, listen, like, we know it's in it for the company. We know it's in it for the employees. Hey, guess what? There's a real benefit to you too, to be a sponsor instead of a hoarder.
So, Jay, I'm curious here. So first, thank you for saying I was a good manager
and
not a hoarder. Thank you there. We'll start with that. Was there any correlation between the managers that flourished other people, kind of like a farming system, right? Because now they have the intake and the best talent wanting to come to them. We tend to go back to sports a lot. So I'm thinking Andy Reid, right, has the most coaches out there in the NFL. Was there any correlation to the manager's tenure there and the growth of that particular manager that was doing the promoting?
Yeah, I couldn't look at that. We couldn't really look at that with the data that we had. But we talked to people in companies across continents, right, to make sure that this wasn't like a one company they were letting this thing in. And I think that is really what we found, because what we found was that that reputation, especially if you develop it earlier in your career, it sticks with you. So you become a magnet for talent throughout your career. And then, why we couldn't tie this to development, right? One of the things that I think the research has shown, and just all of us who've been in organizations know, is that, like, your ability to attract, retain, and manage talent, it matters more as you get higher up in the organization. Yep. And so having demonstrated those skills, right, pretty natural with those folks.
You could also have some boomerangs, some people that came through your farm system, Ryan, that then go off and do other things, both within the company, maybe outside the company. They come back because you're a great leader, great manager, and they send them back to you. We've all heard that if we want something done, we can incentivize people to do both good and bad, right? But we can incentivize people to do what we want.
Yeah.
Right? If the right incentives are there. So question might be, why don't we incentivize the managers to promote?
Well, first of all, here's just a call out to all the listeners. If anybody's willing to study that and do an experiment, because I've yet to see a company that really has tried this. I think that to the extent that companies do, I think companies try to do this. So like, a bunch of companies that I've worked with, like you get all their good data and you see like there's business performance ratings and then there's like a people or leadership performance rating, right? And one's meant to measure how well like you're growing the business. The other's how well you're developing your people. But then when you look at like what's correlated with promotions and financial incentives, it's almost exclusively on the business performance piece.
Right.
And nobody really gets punished if they're not a great people leader. There's your corollary in academia, which is not a good one, so I probably shouldn't say it, but like we graded on our teaching and our research.
That's right.
And if you're awesome at research, you're going to get promoted as long as you like barely eke over the bar with teaching. But if you're amazing at teaching and can't publish a paper, like,
yeah,
you're out.
Yeah, it's the pathway to tenureship. This is, and I've never liked the two structures. Like I've always like, if you're a great teacher, just be a great teacher.
Yeah,
and just do that. And if you're a great researcher and you don't like teaching, there's so many researchers the professors that I work with that. They're just great researchers and they love research, but like getting in front of 50 kids, 100 kids or whatever, and taking them through some like that was not fun for them. There's no enjoyment. In fact, it's takes away from their research and all they want to do is research. And so I've always thought of that system and just say, pick a lane, or if you want to both do 3, if you want to do both, that's great. But if you really just want to research, you really just want to be a great teacher, great, but excel somewhere.
Yeah, we could do a whole nother podcast if you want to read academia. But I do think I think it is, but it's curious, how do you, it is curious, how you, so, some of the pushback I get when I say, well, let's incentivize promoting people.
Right.
So if you're cynical, right, I think the pushback I've heard is, well, you're just going to get managers to try to get rid of the people they don't want to work for. They're going to promote people before they're ready or promote their crappy employees. And there's gonna be
if they were rated at a 4 to 5, you can only promote, you can only promote all-stars.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
like we had a rule at Walmart 100 years ago. There was an unwritten rule that you couldn't promote trash. And so if somebody went to ladies' wear and they just sucked in ladies' wear, you either trained them up, or you fired them. But you couldn't promote them to electronics.
Mm-hmm.
So we did, and no one talked about it.
Yeah.
But it was an unwritten rule. Yeah, you just didn't promote trash. You didn't take your problem and push it to another department. And I love that because, and I would talk openly with employees when I would manage the departments and just say, hey, listen, if you want to go to another place, cool, I'm down. Mm-hmm. However, you got to be excellent.
Well, William, I think that's your point, Ryan. You asked about other blockers, right? So a manager can be a blocker. There's also this the primary way that people move in organizations is eventually there is a job opening somewhere. And so even if it's sort of filled through networking, there is an official job posting that you need to apply to.
Right.
And a lot of companies, I think, I'm not saying they're not thoughtful, but I don't think they think through the logic of what the rules are about who can apply and when. So part of it is one, do you have to be in your role a certain amount of time? And are you artificially constraining people who could move earlier, right? But you also want them to develop skills. So you might not want people to get a job and apply in another month. And then do you need, at what point do you need to let your manager know? Do they need to sign off?
Right.
You can imagine there's some risk about how you approach that politically, right? If you want to leave your current manager, and sometimes you actually do want to leave that manager.
Yep.
Right. It's not just development, but you want to, and so and that could discourage people, right, from actually pursuing those. So, the company you think about, you build these structures, you build an internal job board, you send out newsletters, you publicize all this stuff. But if I'm scared about having to inform my manager, or there's sort of some time enrolled rule, I think that can constrict sort of really, it's not as free of a market as maybe it could or should be.
Yeah. I could see the political side getting emotionally in the way, but I think AI in general, but getting into the specific parts of AI, the speed of business is it already has, it's going to increase. Like that idea, kind of an old timey idea of like, you got to be here 90 days. And then, you got to be here 9 hours. So, I don't know about skills. Like we need to get you to the place where you can use those skills, because I just think the pace, and I think that's going to be for all of us to deal with the business pace change and things like that. Like we got to recalibrate that entire model, not just around good managers, bad managers, blockers, but just the speed in which business needs those skills deployed to different places.
So, JR, question I have is, because I've been through this. I've been through this myself. My last stint in corporate, where I wanted to, and I'm not a shy person. I'll like, if I want something, I'm gonna go get it. But I was afraid almost to apply for another job because I couldn't just apply. I had to ask. I had to get permission. Talk to the manager. This is what I want to do. Get the permission. Then I can go be recommended for the new role. And there was always a fear of retribution or just the conversation. Like I didn't gel with the manager. And so I just stayed complacent. In the end, I ended up no longer at the company. It took a couple of years, but I got complacent enough where I was like, great paycheck. I'm getting paid. I'm doing well. They keep giving me more money, but I never got to do what I wanted to do because of this manager. And so I left. And so I guess the question is, from me anyway, is how do we prevent that fear, remove that fear of rejection or confrontation with the manager?
Well, I think part of this is like cultural, right? Is you really create this idea of like free movement within the organization. And I think part of that, it does have to come top down from leadership. One of the stories that I still include in lots of my papers, even though it's super dated, is Cisco was one of the first companies to create. They didn't so much create like an internal talent market, but this was back in like the early 2000s. They created an online system where employees could reach out to managers across other parts of the organization to have coffee chats, essentially to sell themselves and find out about other organizations.
Right.
They built this system and there was like a revolt. All the managers were like, shut this down. Why would I invest in my people if all of a sudden they can basically go shop themselves inside the organization? And what the leadership team said was, if you don't want your people to shop themselves around, be a better manager.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. And it takes kind of that ethos, like that top-down piece, to be like, we are in a market, right? So we take the restrictions off. And if you are a good manager, you're developing your person, you're providing them with great opportunities, like, then it's your job to get them not to not apply, but right, like look for the right opportunities, the right time for them, and not try to leave you.
I think the understand, kind of like the back to sports, the farming system, right? Like if AA, AAA, single A, if they're doing their job, when the major league team needs to get rid of the third baseman, there should be either someone to step in or enough to trade off. And I think the saying is very true. And William, you use this a lot with free agency in work, and free agency with sports. And it's the most logical thing that makes sense to me.
Well, you guys are clearly right, like college football guys. Like this is way, like think about, okay, so think about like NIL, right?
Yeah.
Like it is like if you want these 5 stars that you've recruited to stay, and they're not going to play, but some of them aren't going to play right away, even if you're paying them. Like
Arch Manning,
you have to give them a pathway, like let them know what it's going to look like, so they feel like they're developing, and they know when the time comes to shine, they'll be ready. Like you have to like not just have that in place, but you have to be able to communicate it, right? Like to actually sell that to people so that they want to stick around.
I think, Ryan, getting to your particular situation back at that company, I think that the worst thing is you have to ask permission. You have to let them know. You have to ask permission, get their recommendation, because only poor talent will go through that process and they'll dump poor talent. So I think that system kind of is an old-fashioned system. It's probably die off like the dinosaurs and smoking. So the thing I think is ultimately you take this out of people's hands and you put this in AI's hands. And then they recommend, hey, based on your performance, based on your skills, based on your passions and, a lot of other factors, we think you'd be great for a job over here. And then they make the recommendation.
Right.
So it takes it out of the manager's hands and it puts it into employees' hands and say, oh, I didn't even know I could do that. And again, some people are not going to like that.
I have no problem with
I like that because it takes all the blockers like you just went through. Again, I got to ask for permission. I got to get your permission. And then you got to give me a recommendation. Like, why do we have that? Like that just, I don't like that at all.
Can I play a little devil's advocate?
Oh, hell yeah.
He's doing something coming at us here. Do it. Let's do it.
So this is less, it's not something that I have like research evidence on.
Oh, no, that's fine.
I think this kind of like this AI technology around like matching is super freaking cool.
Yeah.
Right? Like the technology that LinkedIn uses on the back end, that Indeed uses, that a lot of these applicant tracking systems use, that some of these newer systems, right, that have gotten a ton of funding, like Fuel, like Eightfold, right? A lot of things like the way that they actually sort of are able to gather data and find skills and match those to jobs. It's not perfect, but it's way better than anything we've ever had in the past. And I think that's freaking cool. But here's my concern with those systems, or at least the deployment of those systems is, at least the way my understanding from where I've seen those work is that they essentially give you like a match score, right? Like here's a job that's a great match for your skills.
Yeah.
Right? From an organizational perspective, that's kind of cool because you're matching people who could do the job right away to this other job. And I think from an employee perspective, it's like, well, where can I cash in on my skills? Kind of cool. But from a long-term employee and organizational perspective, I worry about like that, like where does the development happen? Because if basically you're taking people that already have all the skills to do a job and put them into a job that requires those exact same skills, like you're just becoming like you get really good at one particular thing, right? Like how do you develop the future leaders? Like how do you get a manager? So this is part of what I see internally with the hiring is like managers want people who can get up to speed in 60 seconds, right? They want a Ferrari. They don't want a Camry, right? That you have to sort of slowly get up to speed. And so like, how do you get managers or the company to say like, really what we want in some cases is somebody with 80% of a match, because we need like people haven't had this management experience. So we need somebody who hasn't managed people to actually be in this role. And that's kind of scary.
Yeah. I think that also gels with, building the skills. Who's in charge of building their skills? Okay. Is it learning and development, training and development, or is it the manager? Is it the self-learner kind of model, like what they have access to? Are you hiring or transferring, based on potentiality? They've, like I said, they have 80%, but they're going to have to click the other 20% on that. And again, these skills that we're talking about are not the skills of yesterday. They're not the, what do we say, Ryan? The compartments of today are not the compartments of tomorrow. And so it's just one of those deals that worked then-ish, maybe. I don't think so. And if we try to do that in a system that's moving at a faster pace, we're going to have to be more flexible on what skills they have and what skills they can develop and who's going to develop those skills. And I don't think anybody has that nailed down at all. I don't think there's a corporation on the planet that has that nailed down. And so I think I did want to ask both of y'all a question to see if I could get it's a trick question, but who owns internal mobility?
JR, I'll let you go first.
Who?
Yeah, I did that.
Just put it to the guess, Ryan. I mean, damn, that's harsh, dude.
People are here to hear.
Who owns it? Oh yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
So
he just for those that are listening and not watching, he just rolled his eyes. Jared just rolled.
Yeah, well, because I don't have,
So I see two paths for this, right?
Yes.
So one, it's in a learning organization, whatever that is, or
Right.
organizational evaluation, learning and development. The other is in talent acquisition.
Oh,
And I think a little bit that this should, I think it should reside in talent acquisition.
okay.
My sense, because I think that
I'm gonna
all
crush your dreams.
stuff
But go ahead.
that talent acquisition does,
Uh,
we are really internally, like it is talent acquisition internally, right? Moving people around is putting butts in seats or skills to roles. And I think that's a lot where that sort of expertise lies. And then I think you don't get as much of a disconnect, right? I also think then when you're hiring externally, you're hiring knowing how people are moving around internally. And like, I think that organizations, and some organizations have this, but some larger organizations, they're not a ton. Like, I talk to a lot of talent acquisition departments, huge ones, really well resourced. But you ask them, like, how many internal recruiters do you have? And it's either 0 or like 3. We have 3 internal recruiters and 75 external recruiters. But like, who is sort of
who owns it?
to the,
Somebody's got to own it.
and I think owning that, like, that's kind of that'd be
You
my
go TA. All right, Ryan, what do you got?
Yeah.
I'm not far off from the reasoning. I
Mm.
think I think this is more of a culture thing for me in the organization. However, I think every step of the way they believe I think TA thinks they own it. Hiring managers think they own it. The only ones I don't think they own it is the employee. I think the employee feels like everybody owns it and they need to be,
And which means that nobody, if everybody owns it, nobody owns
it. What I kind of feel, what I've always kind of felt is executives own it, right? Like there's an executive somewhere, someone owns it there and pushes it down. But I really think it's up to the employee to own it themselves. And I know that's not the right.
No. It goes back to a longer question of who owns your career, who helps you with career management.
Yeah.
Does a company help you with career management, or does the individual manage their own career?
I feel like you're going to crush both of us now. So.
Oh, hell yeah, of course. Because historically, talent acquisition, recruiters in general, they get to onboarding and they drop the baby off and they focus on the next rec. That's basically, for the history of talent acquisition, the line of demarcation between recruiting and HR is onboarding. And that, whether or not we like that or not, that's just how the world has worked previously. And so TA, we know a lot of professionals in recruiting, and they say they care after onboarding, but rarely do they check in with the people that they've hired, the company has hired, because they're on to the next thing, like Jay-Z, on to the next one. They're on to the next job rec. And that's their job, is to get those bums in seats, or, whatever. They've got to get the butts in seats. And so they're working 40 recs. How can I go and focus on somebody's internal mobility? So I like kind of the internal mobility of being some internal recruiters, although the internal recruiters are going to be hated by the external recruiters because they've sold out and become a part of HR. HR and recruiting hate each other. It's like sales and marketing. They have a deep-seated hatred for one another because recruiting's budget is under HR. Yet HR knows very little about what happens in recruiting. So these are big companies, mom and pop taco stands. Doesn't matter. Same stuff happens. It's this as far as the blame. I did like your take on learning. Learning and development, whatever it is at your company, learning and development, training and development. I like that because it takes it away from HR and recruiting, and it puts it over there and systematizes it there. And again, I'm using systems, not people, in my mind, because I think if we use people, we're going to have the same historic problems that we've had in the past of the blame game. But if we use systems, the systems that the learning and development team have access to are going to be a hella different and hella better than the systems of either HR or recruiting, and tear that apart.
No. So, well, okay. So a couple things. I have a couple reactions, which I think love the way you're thinking there. One super easy win for me to make internal hiring more successful,
Right.
is to actually do onboarding for internal hires. So you were asking sort of what sort of
Yeah.
projects in the work. I have this paper that who knows if it'll ever get published, but
We'll publish it.
we did all these surveys, but the learnings I think are what matter. And so right, so what we know, when we hire people externally, when companies hire people externally, they almost always hire people who have done, or they prefer to hire people who've done that same job elsewhere.
Right.
But we do all this onboarding to get them up to speed on the culture and the specifics of the job and all this stuff. Internally is where we tend to move people who don't have experience in that job and actually are often moving to a whole different part of the company that has a way different culture.
Right.
And we'd say, screw it. They know people. They'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And it's
Deep into the pool.
crazy. And because all the stuff that, purposeful networking, mentoring,
Right.
on the job, like all that stuff, like you should do that same stuff internally and it would make a huge difference.
It's actually worse than you think. So
I think
Well,
I was just going to say the other thing is, we talked a little bit about this earlier about like why mobility is tough is,
right.
I think also is, certainly what I've seen is that most people in organizations, they want to get promoted, right? Because like we just had Thanksgiving, we're coming into with Hanukkah season. You get together with your family and you want to be like, I just got a promotion. You don't want to say like, hey, I just got a lateral transfer. Like it's not super exciting or something to brag about.
I was working for Barbara. Now I'm working for Bob.
Like just my colleague Matthew Bidwell at Ward and I just did this study where we track this again using almost a decade of personnel data. We looked at people who basically started and they had the same amount of tenure. Everything about them was about as identical as it could be. This one person or this group of people stayed in their role because they waited to get promoted, right? So they wanted to move up. Then other people who took a lateral move, right? And then we tracked whether like the salary and career advancement progression of those people over time. And it turns out that when individuals made lateral moves, they paid off tremendously. 3, 4, 5 years down the road, they made a ton more money. And they were like a step and a half ahead on the organizational hierarchy. And you know how flat hierarchies are. So that's like a big deal. But that only worked when you went to like do a job at a different functional area, right? So you actually tried to gain new skills. And this is where I think like maybe development, right? To your point, like development kind of owning that data, seeing how different skills and movements translate, like you can actually show that to employees and managers. And all of a sudden people are more open to opportunities than they might not have been beforehand.
So one of the things I wanted to add to the former comment about the ATSs and onboarding.
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of data in the ATS that's about passions and desires and what they want to learn and, all of this stuff, this real cool stuff. Ryan grew up in recruiting, so he can tell you a little bit more eloquently about that. But you get to know the person, the hiring person. What do you want to do? Like, what do you really want to learn? And it's trapped in the ATS. It doesn't even get pulled through to onboarding. And so I think there's an opportunity there for development to then say, I want to see everything in the ATS so that I can find out, they want to learn Java or, whatever the bit is they want to do. They want to learn that. Okay, let's put them on a learning path. Let's get them on a journey. And then again, connective tissue onboarding, but they're going to have to reach into the ATS to grab those notes because they're not presented anywhere other than in the ATS.
That's really interesting.
It's trapped. It's trapped in that little silo, that little tech. And then once you get to offer letter and then accepted, it moves to onboarding. It goes to HR. And then they get in the HRIS, they get the, payroll, all that stuff. But for development, they've got to reach back in my opinion, they've got to reach back into the ATS and pull out those things because they're there. The data's there. It's just not being harvested.
And from an employee perspective, I've told people this stuff, so somebody should know it. I'm getting communicate.
Yeah. If they already had that knowledge, especially with AI, if they had that knowledge, then the development person is starting off with some data like, oh, okay, hey, I heard when you talked to Brian early on that you really, really want to learn about kind of AI engineering. Okay, so tell me a little bit about that. And then again, put them on a career path, put them on a learning path, excuse me, and get them to learn those things. They told you.
Yeah.
It's just our ability to listen or at least extract that data.
Yeah, it's the JR, when you were saying about when you were telling us about the lateral moves often end up in greater roles and greater responsibility and income, I couldn't help but think about internships. When you go into an internship, you do the rounds, right? You're in 6 or 7 different departments for a different reason.
Correct.
Why? Yeah. I mean, why is that such a, I don't say taboo, but almost taboo in an organization to say, I got a lateral move? It's almost like you've been demoted. You've just been kicked out of your group because you weren't performing. And now we're going to put you over here as a last chance, second chance to see if you've actually performed. Why is, I mean, I guess for me, why is it taboo? Why is it like going to a community college, right? I'm going through that now with my daughter, and I'm like, why not? Oh, everybody goes. Like, yeah, because you're not going to pay a lot of money, and you have zero clue to what you actually want to do. So why are we going to go spend $40,000 a year to do that? But why can't we take?
He's at Cornell. It's a bit more than that.
Yeah, I know.
Well,
him, not for me, not for my daughter.
Note to self.
I know she wants Penn State, $43,000. I'm like, yeah, we're not Cornell. We're like Penn State material, Temple, Drexel, Delaware.
Fair enough.
Yeah, we gotta bring
affordable, but good.
Yeah, affordable but good. Hey, Penn State has the largest networking or alumni network. That's what they sell you. Anyway, but why can't we just eradicate that view and just make it part of growth in an organization?
Yeah. So there's this paper, article, whatever, that I've sort of been dreaming for a decade of writing. And so maybe this will give me the impetus to actually do it. It's called like, what is a promotion? And I think part of this is like, it's the nomenclature that we use, right? Because like really, like when I look at data about people moving laterally, like you're staying at like the same band, right? I think that's often how organizations, the same level or band. You're moving, you're developing new skills. Oftentimes you're actually getting some additional scope of responsibility and a pay increase. May not be like a giant bump, but at least some bump. And so in every way, shape, or form, it's career advancement.
Right.
And it's also like a step to get to the next step. We think about, we don't call it advancement, right? We just call it a lateral move, and that word, that sucks, right? Like in terms of just communicating it, it's not attractive.
I think those terms are somewhat in the way. Promotion, lateral move. There's a bunch of, as you said, nomenclature that's, I think, restrictive and it's old. And unlike advancement is just advancement. And again, that could be advancement where you are, advancement where you, a different job over here. It's advancement. And there's really no counter argument to advancement. And so I think we need to get rid of the old words because I think they're inherently biased, and also and just old. And we just need to kind of, again, move on and evolve. But this is Ryan. I would say this is the last question and all that type of stuff, but I think we just need to do a part 2 because we got all kinds of stuff that we could do.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Joe, this has been wonderful.
Yeah, I was going to say, JR, if we went through and said how many times we can do an episode on this and that, we're just going to give you your own show and let you run with it, and we'll set you up.
Yeah.
Join the network, baby.
Yeah. But thank you. Thank you so much for carving out time.
Thank you both. This was so fun. I hope that you and everybody listening got something out of this.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And
could they not?
JR, before we let you run, where can people find you and information about the ILR?
Yeah, so listen, connect with me on LinkedIn. That'd be amazing. It's JR Keller at Cornell. Just type that in the search bar. I should pop up right away. Do take a look. I think one of the amazing things is that if you are looking to advance your career in HR, we have 2 amazing programs. We have our Master's in Industrial Labor Relations, which is really like a 2-year Master's in HR on-campus program. The program that I run that I'm super excited about is for folks sort of 8+ years in HR that really want to take that next step up to senior leadership. It's a 15-month sort of blended, 3 weeks on campus, 15, the rest of the time doing some really cool online stuff with Cornell faculty. It's our Executive Masters in Human Resource Management program, EMHRM. Google that, take a look. If it looks interesting and you have questions, shoot me a note. I'd love to talk to anybody about it.